Many people ask me why I moved to China and why I have been living here for the past 10 years. The short answer is that I came to Guangzhou to study Chinese. But there is a longer answer too that goes all the way back to 1987. Beginning of the 1980s, my mother had started a career at the foreign ministry in Finland. Her job took her and my father to Africa first, but in 1984 they moved to China. My mother was a secretary at the Finnish embassy in Beijing, and my father followed her there. They lived in Beijing until their post ended in 1987 and they returned to Finland. A couple months later, I was born. I was raised in Finland and didn't move to China until I was 22 years old. So not only my parents lived in China in the 80s, but my mother was expecting me at the time too. One could say that my story with China started before I was born. Now in 2020, I'm going to Beijing to find my roots, to see where they lived and worked more than 30 years ago.
Hi everyone, so we have arrived from Guangzhou to Beijing and we are here now at the Guanghua Road. So this is actually the street where my parents used to live from 1984 until 1987. This is also where my mom was expecting me. So in theory, well actually I was in Beijing in the 80s. I just wasn't born yet because I was born in Finland. So this is the street where they were living their lives, where their everyday lives happened, where they lived, where they worked, shopped. Everything happened basically on this street. Now I'm going to walk from this end. We are at the eastern end now, where my parents probably didn't spend quite as much time, and we are walking towards the west, where their home was and where their office was. So let's walk around this road and see what we can find. So I was born in Finland in 1987 in December. But while I was growing up there, we had a lot of Chinese items at home. We had some furniture, paintings, chopsticks, this kind of things at home. And of course tons and tons of old photos that my dad used to take when they lived in Beijing. So China always had this kind of a presence in our home as well, even though I was growing up in Finland. So when asked why did I decide to move to China 10 years ago, the big reason is probably that influence that my family had on me and sharing those stories. Especially my dad was really interested and still is about China. Used to always watch Chinese movies or Chinese documentaries on TV. He also learned the language because my mom was working here, so she was very busy with her job. So she actually didn't learn Chinese, but my dad did. And 30 years later, he can still speak some basic Chinese. Now here at the background we can see perhaps one of the most known landmarks on the Guanghua Road, which is the CCTV China Central Television new headquarters. Now the TV station started in 1958, but this new building was built in 2012. So when my parents were living here, if they ever came to Guanghua Road on the east side, I'm not sure what did they see at the time. Have to go back to the old photos to see if they have any pictures from this part of the street. When I moved to Guangzhou in 2010, my original plan was to study in Guangzhou for 1 semester as an exchange student, as it was easy to go there. But I was planning to, after one semester, actually move to Beijing to study at one of the universities here. But then fell in love in Guangzhou. Later fell in love with Guangzhou and decided to stay there. I am now here in front of the Kerry Center, where the Finnish embassy is currently located. Finland was one of the first countries that recognized the People's Republic of China in the 1950s. During the 60s and the 70s, the diplomatic relations were rather passive due to the Soviet Union situations and due to the Cultural Revolution in China. But that changed when it turned to the 70s and 80s. In the 1970s, China started to open up again to the outside world, and the diplomatic relations were restored to a more active state. The Chinese Prime Minister visited Finland in 1979, and later the Finnish Foreign Minister Paavo Väyrynen visited China in 1984. That was really the turning point in the diplomatic relations between Finland and China. That was followed by Finnish Prime Minister Kalevi Sorsa visiting China in 1986. And then in 1988, the Finnish President Mauno Koivisto visited China as well. Now these were the years that my parents lived and worked in Beijing. Now this year, 2020, is a rather interesting year because it marks the 70th anniversary of the diplomatic relations between Finland and China. So it is a great year to be here on the Guanghua Road again to see where my parents lived 33 years ago. I hope that my video can be a small part of the celebration of the 70th diplomatic relationship between China and Finland. Let's continue to walk around the Guanghua Road and to see the old neighborhoods, if there's any left, where my parents used to live. Now we are here at the eastern side of the Guanghua Road, and now we are getting really close to the area where my parents used to live from 1984 until 1987. From my dad's old photos, I can see that the Finnish embassy is a house built from red bricks. So that would make it a little bit easier to recognize. We should be right about there and definitely cannot go in, but perhaps we can take a look from the outside how it looks like. So I have a feeling it's going to be this building here on the left side. It's kind of crazy to think that this is where my parents used to work at the time. Yes, here is it. So here at the Guanghua Road 30 is exactly the place where my parents used to work from 84 until 1987, when they then returned to Finland. And it feels a little bit crazy to be in here in the exact same spot where they used to live in so many years. And this was their home street. They work here and they lived a little bit towards the east on this same road. Let's take a look at some old pictures. Such a lucky thing just happened. I have a couple of friends who work at the Finnish embassy here in Guangzhou, and they asked for a permission to take me to see the residence. So we got to actually go inside the yard. We couldn't go in, of course, because that's where the ambassador still lives. But from the outside, I could see the same building where my parents worked. I could take a picture on the exact same spot where my dad took a picture as well. I saw the pool area where my parents had pool parties in the 80s. And it was just such a great feeling to see where my parents used to work about 35 years ago. Now I am walking on the Guanghua Road towards west, and after 1 kilometer or so we should arrive to the place where my parents used to live. I found the building where my parents used to live in the 80s. Number 11. Oh, this side. And obviously, you know, I don't live there, so I cannot go in. So I'm just going to look from the outside. I'm gonna walk around a little bit. I don't know if it's possible to see the same building from the other side or not. When my parents were living there was pretty much nothing on the other side of the road, at least in the few pictures that they took from their windows. Obviously, things have changed a lot since they were here. Back in the 80s, when my parents were living in Beijing, diplomats and other foreigners basically only went to buy daily products and things from the friendship stores. The friendship stores started in around the 1950s, and they were made for foreigners, diplomats, to buy them products. They only accepted foreign exchange currency at their stores, which was a special money for the foreigners to use in China. The foreign exchange currency was used from 1979 until 1995. After that, foreigners also get free access to the renminbi, so the money that Chinese locals used. But at the time that my parents were living here, this was their local store, and they were using the FECs to buy products here. I just confirmed with my father that this is the exact same store where they also went to buy products. It is just a 10 minutes walk from their home, and also around 10 minutes walk from their work as well. Let's go take a look how it looks like inside. I am now here at the Ritan Park, where my parents often visited here for daytime, evening walks. I don't know how many times they have been to this park. This park has a very long history, but then was it in the 80s it was started to open for public as well. And it's very interesting to be in the same place, and I bet like when my mother was expecting me, she also came here for walks. So actually you could say this is the second time I'm in this park. That's the first time after I was born. So my mom took a picture here 35 years ago, and I am trying to find the same exact spot where she took that picture. Let's see if we can find it. So this is the place. I'm gonna put a better picture there that we are trying to find. And here is the Guanghua Hotel. This is where my parents lived first for the first 3 months while they were waiting for their apartment to be released and ready for them. So when they arrived to Beijing first in the 1984, this is the hotel that they stayed for 3 months. So today I'm very happy to have this chance to see this hotel again and to take a picture here as well. Let's see if we can take a quick look inside before we continue our journey. Let's go take a look. When my parents arrived in Beijing, they started working at the Guanghua Road 30 residence and embassy. So that is in the Guanghua Road diplomatic district where they started to work. Towards the end of their work trip, so towards to 1987, the place got a little bit too small to be both the residence and the embassy. So at that time, the embassy was moved here over Taiyuan, which is at the north of the Sanlitun diplomatic district. Now, my parents didn't work here for very long before they moved back to Finland, but apparently the office was here for quite some time, and then later moved to Kerry Center, where it has been for quite a long time now. I'm not sure if the embassy was located in other places between the Taiyuan and the Kerry Center. This was also the last place for me to go over today on these places where my parents lived, worked and visited between 1984 and 1987. So now it's my time to go get my things, get my luggage and go back home to Guangzhou. Thank you for joining on me on this journey on finding these important places. I hope you enjoyed this video and see you on the next one. Bye!